Importing and exporting files in and out of Maya really couldn't be easier. We can do this by going to File and Import, and here we have an Import and Export section. So click File, Import, and here I've already prepped a little file. I put this in an Import and Export folder. Sometimes when I do this, when I import and export from ZBrush, for instance, I put a folder on my desktop and I just call it import export, and then I just delete that entire folder once in a while. That's just a lot easier for me. I don't really have to keep these OBJs, but you might do that as you please. Then we select our file here, and then we just hit import. So sometimes this doesn't work. In this case, we used an OBJ, which is really the format which is used the most to import and export files. If this doesn't work, if you can't import OBJ files, you have to go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, and Plugin Manager. This is where we have all the plugins. Remember how I said that Maya is heavily plugin based? Well, this is what I mean. Here you can see all the different plugins. So whenever there is something which doesn't work fully, maybe your unfolding doesn't work, well, now you have to go here and just reload the unfolding plugin. And in this case, we would just have to search for OBJ. And now you can see that this is loaded, but it might look like this. And then we just click Load and auto load, hit refresh, and then it's going to load perfectly. You might have the same issue with FBX files as well. And then we just have to make sure that this here is auto loaded. If you want to speed up loading of all sorts of stuff in Maya, you can also go in here and you can disable things you don't need. Maybe you don't need Bifrost, for instance. Bifrost is a pretty heavy software, pretty heavy module, which loads all sorts of effect stuff. So by disabling all sorts of Bifrost stuff, that means that it's going to be a lot quicker to load Maya. But we digress. That was just a nice little tip for you. Now that we have our file here, we can rename it to whatever. We can call this head orc. That was misspelled. And so if we want to export this now, we can now just click File and Export. And here we have two options. We have Export All, which is export the entire scene, or Export Selection, which will do exactly that. I tend to only use Export Selection because I don't really know exactly what I have in my scene. It's incredibly easy that you have some stuff here and there which you aren't really aware of. Maybe there is something hidden somewhere. So then we can just do Export Selection, and then we can set this to the same spot as before, and then we can name it. We can name this head export, and here we can just set the actual file format. And depending on the file format, you have different options. So here we can export with, do we want groups on, materials, smoothing, normals, etc. I tend to just disable everything here because I tend to go between ZBrush and Maya the most. But for instance, if you were to change this to FBX, now we can also change all the settings here. For instance, do you want geometry? What part of the geometry do you want? Do you want cameras to be enabled, lights, all these kind of things? In our case, we're just going to do OBJ export, and then we're just going to call this file head export and then export as selection. Now, one thing which is a little annoying is that now let's try to import in both of these guys now. Let's go to File, Import. So now we have both of these. Notice that you can't really shift click them. You can't really Control A. You can't do anything here, which means that you actually can't import two files at any one time, which means you go here and import this guy, move it over, we go File, Import, and we do select the other guy. And now we have import both of them. In this case, this takes like 5 seconds more. But what if you have 2,000 objects? Then it becomes a real problem. Now, I'm sure there's a bunch of little scripts for this online, but I have a little hacky way, or a bit of an unknown little tip. If we go to the Windows Explorer, then we can just drag and drop directly from the Windows Explorer right into Maya. And there we go. Now we have both our models in here at once. This here was actually a huge help for me when I was in VFX, because we had to do this constantly, like importing in hundreds of models all the time. And if you're trying to go here, import, and do it one by one, that is simply not going to work. A similar case of importing and exporting is if you want to bring something from this Maya scene here into another Maya file. Now we can save our project here, and we can just make sure we know where this is. And then I can just call this import example. And now we just save this as a Maya file. So now this is here is fully a Maya file. And then we can go into another instance of Maya. You can have multiple instances. So here you can see that we have multiple windows open. So for instance, you can work in one model file and you can work in a lighting file at the same time, and you can work with both simultaneously, which is quite useful. So now we can go File, Import, and we can do Import. And now we can go to the same directory again. Now we can hit Import. And now you can see that now we are successfully importing our 2 Maya files. This is going to work correctly if you have shaders or anything assigned to it. Now these are just correctly imported as Maya files. But now that we are talking about dirty little Maya tricks, here's a nice little tip for you as well. If you go back to our other scene, now what we can do is we can hit Control-C, and then in this scene here, we can hit Control-V. This is one of these tips you kind of learn when you just being like, let's try it out and see what happens. That's how I learned this. We were just sitting and working, and then like, can you copy between Maya scenes? Of course you can't copy between Maya scenes. And then you try it out, and you can totally copy paste between Maya scenes. So I do this actually a fair bit. This is obviously quite dirty, but it works quite well. Control-C and a Control-V. And now we have it here. So copy pasting between Maya scenes, quite handy. Only downside is that you get this little pasted thing in front of them and they're put into a group. So just be aware of that. And this is also true if you were to open up all the nodes here. You could now see that we would have some pasted nodes, you know, if we actually had shaders assigned to these guys. So it can be a bit dirty, in a dirty way of doing it, but it's quite quick as well if you're just mocking up some quick concepts or whatever. But so in short, the way we import and export is we select what we want to import or export. We go to File, Export Selection. Then we export it out with the correct file format. And if we want to import something, we go to Import. And then we just find the file we want. And this can be a Maya file, an OBJ, FBX, whatever it might be.